They come in more than 50 varieties. They range from 6 inches to 8 feet in length. They move, when they're not angry, with unhurried ease and an almost hypnotic grace. Every year, they take an uncounted number of human lives, mostly among the fishermen of the South Pacific and Southeast Asia. Men who must work the waters where sea snakes evolved and where, with the exception of one species, they've chosen to remain. The fishermen don't like to talk about the snakes. They believe that those who do will be punished by a sea genie, a great king of snakes who does not want his name taken in vain. About all they'll tell you about the snakes is that their bite is painless and that the death which inevitably follows is quick, a matter of hours at most, and easy. You fall asleep and die. Superstition and the aura of mystery surrounding these, the most deadly of vertebrates, have inhibited research into snake behavior as well as the development of anti-venoms for most species. Yet, as more people have chosen to explore the coral jungle, the need to know more about its reptilian inhabitants has grown. We are not the snake's natural enemies, but in ever-increasing numbers, we're in danger of becoming its prey. An expedition is underway to study sea snakes in their natural environment and to collect specimens for laboratory study.
He's going to need it today anyway.
Led by Ben Kropp, world-famous explorer and photographer, the party includes Ben's wife, Eva, their friend, David Krassoff, and snake expert Hal Heatwold, an American scientist based in Australia. Their first location is Hickson Cay, one of the thousands of coral outcroppings that form the Great Barrier Reef, 140 miles off Australia's Queensland coast.
We'll see what you say at the end of the day. Should be a lot of them down there. The last time we got lots of snakes here. You want to use this one, Dave? It's all you have to do is get the snake in that part of it, swim up to it and get its body in there, and then just pull on this handle. And this is different, Eve. Get the snake's head or part of its body through that part, and then just pull on that, and that'll close up on it.
Ah,
first catch.
I see.
Yep, should be good. Pull it back out, and you're ready. Right.
Sea snakes are elusive. Even in areas like Hickson Cay, where they're known to exist in great quantities, there are days when it's simply impossible to find one. But this is July, mating season for the snakes, and a period when they're particularly active. Unfortunately, it's also the time of year when they're particularly aggressive toward intruders on their realm. The divers, however, will not lose this opportunity, in spite of the added danger. Unaware that he's being hunted, this olive snake is itself on the hunt. Slower moving than most of the creatures on which it feeds, the sea snake does not hope to catch its meal in open water. Instead, it will try to trap its prey, in this case a goby fish, in a coral cranny which offers no escape route. The fish will be paralyzed by the snake's bite and then swallowed. Besides lack of speed, the snake is hampered in its hunt by relatively poor eyesight. It more than compensates for these defects, however, by the persistence of its pursuit and its unyielding attacks, which the divers have learned from experience to respect. The sea snake is an air-breathing creature. It began its evolutionary life on land, and it must constantly return to the surface of the sea in order to catch its breath. That's where this one is heading. Yet one of the wonders of its adaptation to undersea life is the infrequency of its need to surface. Some snake species can store enough oxygen to stay submerged for more than 2 hours, and they can slow their pulse rate by 50% in order to conserve oxygen. Ben Kropp's camera captures the mating ritual of 2 olive snakes. Olive snakes are the most commonly sighted snakes in this part of the world, but it is rare for man to observe their courtship in their natural habitat. The female will store the male sperm for weeks, in some cases even years, before an egg is ready for fertilization in her oviduct. And it will require 8 months for the embryo to develop. But the young snake will be born fully equipped for survival, entirely self-sufficient. There will be no period of dependency on its mother. Sensing Eva Kropp's presence, the snakes break off their mating dance. Rashly, Eva decides to capture one of the pair. Angrily, the snake struggles to escape Eva's snare and succeeds. Now the snake turns on Eva, and she makes what could be a fatal mistake. She grabs the snake by its tail, leaving its head free to strike at her. In memory, these few seconds will seem like hours to Eva. She says she would rather tangle with a shark, much more easily diverted from an attack than a snake. This time, Eva is lucky. The snake decides to break off the attack and seeks sanctuary in the coral formations below. Eva proves to be as tough in combat as the snake, and she finally seizes her prey. David Krassoff, armed with a slightly more sophisticated snake catcher, goes after another snake and has an easier time than Eva did. Now, Eva returns to the hunt, and this time she has no difficulty making her capture. Like the other divers, she begins to feel her confidence rising. Perhaps the body of scientific opinion, which insists that sea snakes are basically docile, is correct after all. David confidently approaches another olive snake, expecting another quick victory. This time, though, the snake recoils and catapults into a savage attack. The creatures of the coral jungle are voiceless, but they do speak an eloquent body language. Angered, the snake no longer moves with his normal sinuous grace, but in swift, jerking lunges. There is open water. The possibility of escape and freedom lies behind him, but he seems unwilling, perhaps unable, to break off the attack. Armed only with his underwater camera, Ben Kropp swims to his friend's aid. He succeeds in diverting the snake's attention, but only by putting himself in terrible danger. Now it's David's turn to help Ben by making a quick capture.
I'm glad you got it.
Well, that's your first attack on the first day. They're really persistent, aren't they? I thought he bit you at one stage. I thought he hit you.
I thought he did. I think he might have got me on the flipper. I was a bit slow and I missed it. And the flipper missed it and it just came straight up my legs. Boy, there sure is a lot of snakes down there.
Yeah, but wait till you get out the Sawmers, David. There's more snakes and there's sharks. And there's so many snakes around that you even turn your back on the sharks. You completely ignore them and watch the snakes.
It couldn't be any worse than this.
Eva has never encountered a sea snake in her environment, and the experience proves to be less than relaxing for both parties in the encounter. fight with a killer snake. Next on the Coral Jungle.
Nice. What's that? Looks good.
That's tropical fruit.
Mid-K. Gannett is only 28 miles away, but Ben must navigate carefully in these waters, for they are uncharted, and a careless encounter with reef or coral outcrop could tear the bottom out of his boat. An automated weather station, part of a system designed to give early warning of tropical storms heading for the Australian mainland, is Gannett K's only landmark. In the lee of the tiny island, the divers discover a coral garden, a lush concentration in one small area which possesses all the beauties a reef could offer. Often mistaken by the uninitiated for a sea snake, the synapta, or sea slug, is as clumsy as the snake is graceful. While feeding, its flower-like appendages shovel sand into the continuous filter system which is its body. Any food is digested, and the sand passes right through. Closer still, the microscope reveals perfect anchors and wheels on the sea slug's skin. There are thousands of these tiny spicules, which it uses to drag itself along with a worm-like crawl. Eva flirts briefly with a nudibranch, better known as the Spanish dancer. Its lovely undulations set the tone for a refreshingly peaceful morning's exploration of an exotic underwater terrain. But the coral garden is not as tranquil as it first appears to be. Very soon, this strange landscape reveals the other side of its nature. Amidst astonishing beauties, its inhabitants must endlessly struggle amongst themselves to live. These coral trout battle savagely for their prey. A more methodical predator, the crown-of-thorns starfish, marches on its stomach. Its diet, the live coral of the reef. Some fear that his feeding might destroy the reef, but Ben Kropp, among others, believes that the growth of the reef is too luxuriant for this creature to stunt. Life is abundant in the waters of Gannett Cay, but the coral garden differs from the Garden of Eden in one important respect. It lacks a serpent, and so the expedition must move on.
Yeah. Here. What the hell? Where are the snakes? Do you think it's got anything to do with all those birds on the island? No, I wouldn't think the gannets would bother them or eat them. The seagulls will eat them. And I found them inside of sharks. And people have recorded them from the stomachs of moray eels and gropers and things. But the gannets, I wouldn't think they would bother them. But that's just typical of sea snakes. Patchy distribution like that, because you find them in abundance in one spot and then you move about a mile away and the reef looks exactly the same. I didn't see any, huh? And there won't be any.
The next destination is another speck on the map, Sanctuary Reef. The reef is what its name implies, a perfectly sheltered anchorage. But the reef which provides that shelter also provides danger to the boat, and she must be taken carefully through the narrow, coral-guarded entrance to Sanctuary Lagoon. To be wrecked on these isolated reefs, which most sailors steer well clear of, is to run the risk of a slow and isolated death.
the sand is. Okay, that'll do.
Beneath the surface, the divers encounter a sight both comic and poignant. The short-sighted snakes, their judgment further clouded by the urgencies of mating season, eagerly mistake trailing ropes in the boat's anchor chain for true love. To them, if an object is long, thin, and underwater, it's a potential mate. All is not deception beneath the calm surface of Sanctuary Reef. Genuine mating rituals are also taking place here. To Ben Kropp, the opportunity to get more film of this rarely photographed phenomenon is irresistible. He will intrude on them at the very moment when the snakes are most likely to be angered, inviting almost certain attack. The female leaves the male to defend their mating territory. Relentless in her fury at Ben, she fails to notice David's approach with the catching stick. Here's another reason for the snake's aggressiveness. As most species do, every couple of months, it's shedding its skin, a process that always puts them in a bad temper.
Hal, that one was skinning, or losing its skin, and the bits were coming out everywhere in the water when we tackled it.
And it turned around and headed for Ben.
That's the trouble. When I get in close to film the action of the snake at him, I cop it too.
Bits and pieces of the skin, or is it...
Oh, it looked like a whole pile was swimming around, but there was no snake in it.
Down. Hey, Eva, pick out one of the largest ones in there and hand it to me. We'll milk it. Get some venom.
The world's largest sea snake. A dangerous night dive. And a frightening experiment in the closest imaginable contact with a sea snake. All are next on the Coral Jungle. It has no common name. It's known only by the Latin name given it by scientists, Astrodia stokesii. It's light yellow in color and can grow as long as 8 feet in length and to a thickness as wide as a man's forearm. This is the largest species of sea snake in the world. Very often it proves too powerful to be held by any catching stick, and its fangs are long enough to puncture any wetsuit. Its size makes it valuable, for it will yield up far more venom for analysis than the smaller snake varieties. For David Krassoff, this is a touchy bit of business. But practice has made him unusually adept with his snare, and his capture of the great snake is managed with deceptive ease.
I'm glad this got the biggest head I've seen.
I haven't seen one
Up
before.
beside me. Over on this side. Jeez, a beauty.
Oh, my God. Be careful. Oh, he's so big. Oh, look at his mouth.
I couldn't believe it when it swam up to me, Hal.
Did that one put up a
This is
struggle?
the largest species of sea snake that there is.
Oh, my God.
They get up to about 8 feet, these.
It's enormous.
The biggest ones. He's a beauty, really.
Oh, Jesus.
He's active,
Oh,
too.
Father, look at that.
What sort of snake is that?
But look
That's
at that.
Astrodia stokesii. They're very distinct from the rest of the sea snakes. They have a double row of... See the double row? That's characteristic of Astrodia.
I'd rather see pig.
He must be an old one.
A can of worms, a basket of eels. They're common prescriptions for a mess of trouble, but they can't compare with a garbage can full of sea snakes. Still, they're a little safer to sort out than their land-based cousins because they lack the ability to coil up deceptively before striking out at their handlers.
like to see how big he is compared to this one, huh?
The new one is 5 feet or more long, for sure. Now try to milk him. This is a Strody. This is one of the, but he is the largest, bulkiest of the sea snakes. They have one of the greatest amounts of venom.
I can see his fangs protrude right through.
Yeah, these things get up to about 8 feet long. We see all the venom we've got there. It's a good, they produce probably more venom than any other species of sea snake there. Really should be considered quite dangerous. We'll see if this one can bite through the neoprene. We've tested others of this species. They can. There, he's biting. That's good, right? See if I can get him off now.
Boy, you sure got a big mouth.
Yeah, look, there's the nicks in the soap he went through. He really scarred it quite well. No wetsuits or no protection from ones this size, really.
Hal Heatwold, the scientist on the expedition, prepares to do an autopsy on one of the specimens that has died in captivity.
A recent meal. Just a moment, I'll take the scissors and cut it open and see what it's eaten. Now, that's the stomach. Just a moment, I'll snip off the end of it and we'll push the food out. There it is. It looks like a damselfish of some sort. I'll check it out later to see for sure. If it is, these live in crevices where the olive sea snake usually feeds. They're highly territorial fish, so they'll often come out and attack even snakes that enter their territory.
The remarkable capacity of sea snakes to store oxygen intrigues scientists. What is the most important factor in determining that ability? Their oversized lungs or a unique capacity of their blood to absorb oxygen? In these shipboard experiments, Hal will test both factors.
The red blood cells carry the oxygen, and the amount of oxygen carried depends in part on the proportion of the blood that's made up of red cells. I want to see whether the sea snakes have more effective blood than non-diving reptiles. Now that seals one end of the tube so I can centrifuge it.
What does this centrifuge do, Hal?
Now it spins down the blood cells into one end and leaves the serum at the other, and I can see just what proportion of the blood is cells and what proportion is serum.
Right, I'll start it, Hal.
Yeah, it's reasonably high hematocrit for a reptile, although there are other reptiles that have higher values.
Typically, a sea snake's lung occupies 3/4 of its entire length.
Have a look. That's really
That's
big.
one of the reasons they can stay down a long time. They have a large lung capacity. See this part here, the big part of the lung with a fine network of very small blood vessels?
Mm-hmm.
That's the functional part of the lung where the oxygen exchange takes place.
Armed with a spear gun, David Krassoff sets off on an underwater hunt. He seeks prey that can be hand-fed to other fish by Eva Kropp. Among scientists, there's controversy as to whether any fish will feed on sea snake. In aquarium tests, all fish have rejected it. But the Kropp team wants to repeat those experiments in the open ocean. Perhaps in their natural habitat, some fish will prove to be snake eaters after all. Hal fillets David's catch. Some of it will be offered to the fish plain. Other morsels will be wrapped around bits of snake meat as a sort of coating on what is generally believed to be a bitter pill to most fish.
These are cut pieces of fish. Try those first.
Yes.
And these have skinned sea snake wrapped up in for later.
Okay.
filleted carcass brings sharks closer to the boat, their interest already having been aroused by the vibrations set up by the struggling fish on David's spear. It's the dangerous whaler shark that takes the snack, while the others hover eagerly about. Now aroused and potentially dangerous, the sharks bring the diving party's work to a standstill. David's underwater shouting and jabbing with his spear gun drive the sharks away and permit the experiment to begin. An angelfish rejects the food, but a coral trout snaps up a bit of fish-wrapped snake. A Maori cod is more discriminating, but again, a second trout takes the snake meat. The reason behind this and other feeding experiments is the possibility of a new sea-level Panama Canal through which the snakes could migrate to the Atlantic. Scientists were concerned that in the Atlantic, snakes would have no natural enemies, and they would multiply unchecked and infest the Caribbean and Florida.
Well, that worked okay, huh?
Okay, look, try this yet. Here's a skinned one, part of a skinned snake, and a dead one that's whole, unskinned. See what they do with those.
Should be interesting.
A skinned but otherwise undisguised snake, totally rejected by all Pacific fish in earlier experiments, is offered. There are few takers until the coral trout again takes the free meal. In this decisive offering of the test, there's no camouflage at all, for this unskinned snake turns out to be still alive. The flicker of activity from the snake as a blue cod darts away with it proves that there are exceptions to the rules of behavior found by earlier experimenters. Ben Kropp discovers a new species of sea snake, next on the Coral Jungle. Dolphins accompany the expedition part of the way to Saumarez Reef, which lies 60 miles due east of the Great Barrier Reef, deep in the Coral Sea. The waters around Saumarez are astonishingly clear and offer underwater visibility of as much as 200 feet. More important, they may be the home of a previously unrecorded species of sea snake. If reports of its existence are true, Ben Kropp's party will be the first to study, perhaps even capture a specimen of this new breed. The reef's landmark, an appropriate warning of treacherous waters, is an American Liberty ship, the Francis Preston Blair. At first glance, it appears to be riding at anchor in a calm sea. But the Blair is, in fact, a rusting hulk, driven aground by a tropical storm in 1945. Now it serves and somehow continues to survive as a bombing target for the Australian Air Force. Ben Kropp anchors his small boat not far from the Blair. The rumors about a previously unrecorded snake species prove accurate. On their first dive, Ben Kropp's party sights a pair of them mating. Their markings are entirely unique. time, Ben keeps his distance, quietly making the first photographic record of this exotic variety of sea snake. However, there's no question in his mind about keeping a safe distance. He must try to get close-ups, and he must try to capture them for classification and further study. Once again, he must intrude upon them at the moment of maximum danger, when they're mating. They may look different from other snake species, but their behavior at this moment is typical of them all. They, too, resent intrusion and resolutely defend their territory.
Hey, what species here? Hello? Oh, hurry! He's on the flipper!
Eva and Hal come to Ben's assistance. By this time, the female has retreated, but the male, though clearly tiring, remains on the attack, characteristically dogged and persistent. Eva decides to pursue the female, anxious to capture it before it can find a hiding place in the coral. At long last, the male slows its attack. Exhausted by its own anger, it becomes fairly easy prey for Hal.
Oh, it's good to get these.
You right?
It's a bit lively. Gee. Oh. Well, I bet you're glad you finally got that one.
Yeah, it's good to get those. Come out the other way then, if you like me. See, this is a new species, and that's the one we've been looking for. It's a lot smaller and darker than the olive ones. And you notice how in the water, did you see how it had the look like long stripes down the side of the body,
Yes.
which show up when it's moving along.
Looked,
And it makes it look like a stripe, but it's not. It's just pink skin in between the scales.
yeah, it's almost candy stripe, really.
Yeah, yeah. It is a species that hasn't been described yet.
You would think that the capture of a new species of sea snake would provide enough sense of adventure and accomplishment for one day. But the night world, under the seas, has a special fascination for the divers. They hope to cast some light on a part of the sea snake's existence about which almost nothing is known. No one knows if sea snakes rest when darkness comes, or whether they use it as cover for hunting and feeding. The lamps cast short arcs of light into the blackness. The divers explore a world that seems to them transformed. The sudden light seems to draw the snakes out of the gloom of the seabed. Light attracts creatures other than snakes, and though it enables the divers to observe the snakes below them, they can't keep their eye on them and on the sharks that are now circling above their heads. The observers have become the observed, the center of an ever-tightening circle of unwelcome attention. Most dangerous of all experiments, next on the Coral Jungle.
Being curious and some of them develop into attacks, some just fizzle out. And
I think probably 90% of the attacks are sort of provoked after the curious snake comes up and has a look at you.
yeah, but how much do you need to provoke an attack? Because each of the attacks we've had, all we've done is simply push the snake away with our flipper when he got too close, and that's a normal reaction.
But you don't have to be there.
I don't know really which way to go about it, whether to give them a good old kick as soon as they come up or try and be friendly to them.
Yeah, I think we should do a lot of experimentation on this to prepare something for skin divers so that they know. You know, if you see a snake, what do you do? Do you go out of the water and walk across it on your flippers, or do you...
or do you freeze and let them lick you all over?
The feeling I get is that when I'm down there, and they do have an attack, sometimes I get the feeling if I just stop and freeze, but it won't really attack.
Maybe we ought to have an experiment doing this. Send Dave down and let him sit in front of one and see what it does. And
Sit in front of a curious one.
yeah.
I think we're sure my feet will be well protected.
No matter how certain David Krassoff is about the theory he wants to test, it's still only a theory. He and Ben put on their protective wetsuits with special care today, making certain that every part of their bodies that can be protected is protected.
I wouldn't be in his shoes.
Your ears are sticking out, David.
One consistent factor in the behavior of all sea snakes is their curiosity. An olive snake moves toward David as he hangs motionless in the water. The snake uses all its senses to study this stranger, this alien in its domain. It shows no signs of fear or outrage. Deliberately, David shifts his behavior from passive to active, thrusting the snake away. The snake's response is instantaneous. Showing no sign of fear over the size of the intruders or their numbers, he shifts his attack from David to Ben to Hal. It seems that David has proved his point. The safest course when encountering a sea snake is to resist the natural impulse to fight it off, to instead exercise almost superhuman self-control. David can't resist putting his theory to the test a second time, but in much more dangerous circumstances. The snake cruising toward him is 6 feet long, an Astrodia, even larger than the one the expedition captured with such care earlier. Its fangs can easily penetrate a wetsuit, and Ben and Hal are startled that David would choose such a dangerous partner to further prove his theory that sea snakes won't bother him while he's motionless. As the giant Astrodia moves under David's kneeling body, the air bubbles from his regulators slow and stop. David dares not breathe. The slightest movement may startle and aggravate the snake. The Astrodia is displaying the same unconcerned curiosity the olive snake demonstrated earlier in the first test. This time, David must do nothing to cause that mood to change. His life depends on it. Of the current, so gentle that the divers didn't notice them before, now become critical. The gentle surge is pressing David's hand down on the Astrodia's head. He seems almost to be patting the snake, but it's not a movement he would voluntarily attempt. David can hold his breath no longer. A great rolling lungful of bubbles is released as David must finally gasp for air. The sudden motion does not startle the snake. Curiosity finally satisfied, its temper unexcited, David's breath becomes the snake's exit cue. He swims off to the surface, himself in need of some air.
Boy, it pays to treat him gently, doesn't it?
Ah, that was great. Just great, David. Give us that hand, Ben.
Right up.
Got it? Hey, that was a big snake, though, Hal. He must have been about 6 feet. You're lucky he wasn't in a biting mood. David's had it.
That's the way to handle him.
Grace is a function of power, a natural expression of a creature's confidence that he is the master of his environment. It could be said that while the divers were learning about the sea snake, they were also learning from it, learning to copy its unhurried pace, learning to model their behavior after the sea snake when confronting the unknown. Once an alien here himself, the sea snake is a brilliant example of the power of adaptation in the coral jungle.
Snakes, like sharks, awaken some primal fear in us. To know them is not necessarily to love them. That's asking too much for most of us. But they are as fascinating as they are frightening. If it is impossible to entirely banish our unreasoning fear of them, it is possible to coexist with them in the underwater world.